Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to completely change the way you look at your own body. We tend to think of ourselves as single, unified beings, right? But biologically speaking, you are an incredible, self-sustaining factory. It's this flawless, nonstop operation working 24/7 just to keep you alive. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this ultimate biological factory actually operates. But before we look at the machinery itself, I want to hook you with a pretty fundamental question. Think about it for a second. What is the single most important criteria for life? Like what truly separates a living organism from a non-living object? Now, you might instinctively think, well, it's breathing or having a heartbeat or maybe being able to walk around. But the true answer isn't always something we can actually see with the naked eye. The absolute defining characteristic of life is molecular movement. Sure, visible movement, like a cheetah running or a leaf turning toward the sun, that's obvious. But even when you are perfectly still, deep inside your cells and tissues, there is this chaotic, continuous, entirely invisible movement of molecules. This microscopic dance is absolutely necessary for all life processes. Literally, if that molecular movement stops, the factory shuts down for good. So, let's dive into this by mapping out the 4 fundamental life processes that make this continuous molecular movement possible. Think of these as the 4 main departments of our factory. First up is nutrition, which is how we fuel the engine. Second is respiration, where we unlock the energy. Third is transportation, our internal highway system. And finally, excretion, which is all about taking out the waste. Let's start with Department 1, nutrition. This is where we fuel the engine. Because all living things are basically carbon-based, we constantly need outside raw materials. We're talking primarily food, water, and air to build the body, repair damaged parts, and generate power. And this beautifully illustrates a massive divide in nature's supply chain. On one hand, you have autotrophic nutrition. Plants are the ultimate self-starters here. They manufacture their own fuel entirely from scratch, using simple inorganic substances like carbon dioxide and water, and they power the whole thing with sunlight. On the other hand, you have heterotrophic nutrition. That's us, the animals. We can't make our own fuel, so we have to outsource it. We get our food directly or indirectly from plants, breaking it down either inside our bodies or, in the case of fungi, outside. Let's look at exactly how this manufacturing process works for plants. Photosynthesis is this incredibly elegant 3-step assembly line. Step 1, the green pigment, chlorophyll, absorbs light energy from the sun. Step 2, that light energy is instantly converted into chemical energy, which physically splits water molecules apart into hydrogen and oxygen. And then step 3, the carbon dioxide is reduced by that hydrogen to form carbohydrates. Just like that, inorganic gas in water becomes stored chemical fuel. It's brilliant. Now, contrast that quiet, solar-powered process with human digestion. Biologists call this holozoic nutrition, which is just a fancy way of saying we take in solid food. We have a highly active mechanical and chemical assembly line. It kicks off in the mouth, where teeth crush the raw material and saliva immediately starts breaking down starches into sugars. Then it drops into the stomach, which is basically a highly acidic vat where pepsin dismantles proteins. Next, it moves into the small intestine, where bile and pancreatic juices finish the job, turning fats, carbs, and proteins into basic molecules. These are then absorbed by tiny finger-like structures called villi straight into our blood. Finally, the large intestine reclaims the water, and the waste is prepped for the exit. All right, moving on to Department 2, respiration. This is where we unlock the energy. What's truly fascinating here is how our cells actually choose their combustion method on the fly, and it's based entirely on oxygen availability. Aerobic respiration is our primary, highly efficient engine. It happens inside the mitochondria, uses oxygen, and burns our glucose fuel completely. This produces a massive amount of energy, along with carbon dioxide and water. But let's say you're sprinting and your muscles suddenly run out of oxygen. Well, they switch to anaerobic respiration automatically. This backup system happens in the cytoplasm. It produces much less energy, and it leaves behind lactic acid. And that is exactly why your muscles burn during a heavy workout. Now, regardless of how the fuel is actually burned, the ultimate goal of respiration is to produce this, ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. Think of ATP as the universal, rechargeable battery of the biological factory. It is the absolute secret to cellular power. The energy released from burning food is used to attach a phosphate molecule to ADP, which basically charges the battery. Whenever any cell in your body needs power to do literally anything, it just uses a little water to break that bond, releasing the stored energy exactly where it's needed. Let's look at Department 3, Transportation. This is our internal highway system. So we have the fuel and we have the charged batteries. But human bodies have trillions of cells. How does this energy actually get delivered? Well, you actually have roughly 60,000 miles of blood vessels inside you. It's wild. And this vast internal highway relies on a highly specialized fleet of delivery and maintenance vehicles suspended right there in your blood. You've got the plasma, which is the fluid highway itself, hauling food, water, and waste. You have the red blood cells acting as your dedicated oxygen delivery trucks. The white blood cells, they're your security patrol, actively hunting down and killing harmful microbes. And the platelets are your emergency repair crew, rushing to clot the blood and patch the highway the very second you get a cut. But obviously, a highway is completely useless without a motor to keep the traffic flowing. The crucial point here is understanding this continuous double circulation loop, which is driven by the muscular pumping of your four-chambered heart. Fresh, oxygenated blood from the lungs enters the relaxing left atrium. Then, the left ventricle forcefully pumps it out through the aorta to the entire body. Once that oxygen is dropped off, the depleted blood returns to the right atrium, and the right ventricle pumps it right back to the lungs to refuel. It is a flawless figure-8 loop that literally never stops. It's really incredible to see how evolution adapted this plumbing system based entirely on an organism's energy demands. Mammals and birds use a ton of energy to keep their bodies warm, right? So they absolutely need a four-chambered heart to keep that rich, oxygenated blood strictly separated from the depleted blood. It's all about maximum efficiency. But amphibians and reptiles, they don't heat their own bodies, so a three-chambered heart with just a little bit of blood mixing works totally fine for them. And fishes take it even further with a super simple two-chambered pump, mostly because their blood gets oxygenated directly as it flows right through their gills. Plants, of course, don't have a pumping heart at all, but they brilliantly use physics and specialized tubes to move things around. The xylem acts a lot like a giant straw, pulling water and minerals straight up from the roots. It does this by using the suction force created when water simply evaporates from the leaves up top. Meanwhile, the phloem acts as a two-way street. It uses ATP energy and osmotic pressure, which is basically just moving water to create high-pressure zones, to actively push the sugary food made in the leaves down to the roots and out to the branches. Finally, we arrive at Department 4, excretion, taking out the waste. As we know, any factory generating power is going to create toxic byproducts. And if those byproducts build up, the whole system shuts down. The human solution to this waste management is an absolute masterpiece of microengineering called the nephron. Your kidneys are packed with millions of these tiny filtration plants. Blood loaded with nitrogenous waste, which, by the way, are just the toxic leftovers from breaking down proteins, flows into a little cup-like structure called the Bowman's capsule. Right there, the nephron perfectly filters out the toxic urea, excess salts, and water, turning it into urine to be expelled. But at the same time, it actively reabsorbs all the good stuff back into your bloodstream. Now plants, once again, handle things completely differently. Since they don't have kidneys, they utilize some surprisingly creative methods to dump their waste. They actually breathe out gaseous waste, like excess oxygen, through tiny leaf pores called stomata. And this is wild. They will literally pump solid waste into aging leaves, deliberately letting them dry up and just fall off the tree. It's a genius disposal system. They even store complex toxic waste as gums and resins, hiding it deep inside old dead wood tissue, or they just secrete it directly out of their roots right into the surrounding soil. When we step back and look at the big picture here, the sheer complexity and reliability of it all is honestly staggering. Life on Earth truly does depend on carbon-based molecules, yes, but it is the continuous, flawless, interconnected looping of these four automated systems, nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion, that keeps the factory running. One feeds the other, over and over in a perpetual cycle of invisible movement. So as we wrap up this explainer, I just want you to take a deep breath. Right now, at this exact second, your heart is flawlessly pumping blood through miles of vessels. Millions of your cells are actively cracking open ATP batteries to keep you warm, and your microscopic nephrons are perfectly balancing the chemistry of your blood. The factory is humming along beautifully. So, which of these invisible, miraculous processes will you appreciate just a little bit more today? Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.